One day the gate suddenly opened, the whole world fell, monsters roamed around the earth, countless people logged out and left again, and only a few people used special powers, awakening supernatural powers. People call them saviors of humanity. Among them is male lead Lee Hyun-wook, who is known as the last savior of humanity. While standing at the top, Lee Hyun-wook disappeared from the earth again. Lee Hyun-wook woke up and saw that he had returned to the past, but unfortunately, it was around the time he was in the army. Right now, Lee Hyun-wook is struggling and working hard at a difficult training session. He secretly moved a bullet from his pocket and put it in his chewing mouth. The system shows a message: the current manipulable metal weight is 300 grams. Shortly, all humanity will die, blood will flow into rivers, and Lee Hyun-wook alone must solo with a group of people from the Church of God. Unfortunately, this group was so strong that they played a sneak attack game, and they beat Lee Hyun-wook like a dog. He died without commitment. At the last minute, Lee Hyun-wook was hit in the face by a tall guy who hit a huge rock, ending his life. He never thought that he would be able to travel back to the past like in the novel. Lee Hyun-wook was still diligently chewing bullets, and the system congratulated him on realizing the thriving method, with 10 minutes left to complete metal consumption. The commanding officer over there was still constantly bullying everyone. Lee Hyun-wook was shaking. Back in the past, now his skills also returned to their starting point. Well, that's okay, no matter how much you have to go back to the military, being bullied like a dog, the food is so boring that you can't smell it. Lee Hyun-wook stood in the queue to eat when the chief officer called him to tell him to do something before eating. He was bored, tired like a dog, just returned from training, and was forced to do something next. The talented officer smiled contemptuously at Lee Hyun-wook, who was just trash. Lee Hyun-wook also just remembered this guy, the military trash, Oh Sang-guk. That guy, his face frowned and pointed at him. An F-rank guy should look like an F-rank guy. If you're useless, you should at least know how to do a little more work. Lee Hyun-wook in his previous life thought that he would never be able to surpass level F. He was very bitter and laughed at by the trash, but now he couldn't bounce back. Lee Hyun-wook silently glared at this officer. The other guy found Lee Hyun-wook's attitude annoying. He chanted a spell to call out a ring around his hand to attack the male lead. Lee Hyun-wook easily dodged it. He smiled teasingly, saying he would go to work, if there was food first. The reason the male lead is so confident is because there are many people around. Oh Sang-guk doesn't dare to do anything too much anymore. Lee Hyun-wook sarcastically said, a guy caught up in some rumors of abuse of power, how can he become a noble person in society in the future? Oh Sang-guk also stopped making me foolish, he shouted and told the others to come in and eat quickly. Lee Hyun-wook told his friend to just go eat and he didn't eat. He sneaked out the back, trying to reassure himself to be patient. This was still bearable, nothing compared to what the exploitative bastard had done to him in his previous life. Lee Hyun-wook can't stand it. You bastard Gordon Protzi, if you had to stay longer for causing trouble you wouldn't be able to catch up with that bastard. His system showed a notification that he had completed metal consumption, and now he could manipulate another gram of metal. Lee Hyun-wook glanced at the announcement. He pulled out a pile of spoons he had just stolen, but now he couldn't tell the whole world that he could level up. While the people in the cafeteria do not have spoons to eat, the male lead leisurely eats spoons outside. Metal absorption start notification system. Consumption time is 13 seconds, expected to increase metal manipulation by 1.25 grams after absorption. Lee Hyun-wook held the estimated knife, an M7 knife weighing 140 grams. If he wanted to add more weight to it to create an impact, he could only control one tree right now. If the bullet casing increases by 1 gram, you only increase by 1.25 grams. At this rate, it would take a long time for him to catch up with the time before he died. Lee Hyun-wook looked up at the watchtower. He felt a headache. He only had 3 days to prepare. Then he had to defeat the monster boss at level 1, he returned to practice metal manipulation again. 3 days later, at station number 5, Battalion number 1, Brigade number 3, Lee Hyun-wook was guarding with another person. Park Junmo wanted to find a way to talk to him, but the male lead looked cold and didn't seem to care much. Lee Hyun-wook looked at the system's announcement, then he suddenly turned to ask Park Junmo if he believed him. Park Junmo didn't understand what was going on, but he also said yes. The male lead confidently stepped on the trigger. At the same time, somewhere, a space gate opened, and monsters fell out from inside the gate, preparing to destroy the Earth. At this time, the others were still sleeping. Lee Hyun-wook went solo with the monsters alone. He controlled a knife to stab a monster in the face. He had been standing here since afternoon, waiting all day for these monsters to finally appear. The monster that had just been stabbed stood up and glared at Lee Hyun-wook. He had never failed to ambush before, perhaps because he was in level 1, it was a bit difficult. This is your second chance and you prefer to avoid repeating what you did the first time. The monsters rushed towards him to attack. Lee Hyun-wook controlled the knife to cut off the head from one animal to another, and a red gem fell out. The male lead picked up the gem and stuffed it straight into his mouth to chew blisters, and the taste was terrible. Lee Hyun-wook knows about the future and he needs to eat metal to become stronger. Mana will also be enhanced after absorbing metal. This means that if you eat all the items you have from now on, life will become easier this time. After eating the pearl, he controlled the knife back and beat the monsters to pieces. Lee Hyun-wook threatened Park Junmo not to report the monster story to his superiors. If the army found it, all these weapons would fall into their hands again. Lee Hyun-wook used his skill set to defeat dozens of monsters in a row. There was a monster that wanted to take the opportunity to hit him from behind. Lee Hyun-wook swung his weapon and slashed the monster's head, and another red gem fell out. He turned and glared at the rest. If anyone dares to sneak attack, I will eat you alive. Lee Hyun-wook gradually instilled fear in the monsters. They did not dare to act anymore. You have to fight while being alert around looking for this group's boss. It's a cunning bitch, the goblin shaman. Lee Hyun-wook bent down to pretend to collect some red gems. I already said hello to you so warmly, I bet he won't miss this opportunity. As expected, the goblin shaman had been hiding in the tree all this time. He threw down a circle around his neck and started to skill. Lee Hyun-wook smiled cunningly. He had been waiting for it for a long time, picked up the stone, and entered the fighting position. Meanwhile, the troops on the hill still didn't know anything. After a move by the goblin shaman, everyone began to change. A group of sharp thorns rose at Lee Hyun-wook's feet. The goblin shaman thought she had defeated him, looked up at the sky, and smiled harshly. But who would have thought that Lee Hyun-wook was unharmed? He had appeared next to the monster, throwing a knife at it. The goblin shaman was able to dodge. He slashed Lee Hyun-wook's oncoming knife. He pretended to panic. The goblin shaman laughed at him with joy. While he wasn't paying attention, Lee Hyun-wook controlled the knife back towards the goblin shaman. The knife was almost close to his neck and this monster still grasped it. He gritted his teeth and smiled, hee hee. Lee Hyun-wook didn't think that this monster could block his sword. It seemed like in the past he was a real failure. Lee Hyun-wook boasted that if he dared to send an entire gang of goblins to hunt you down, don't say anything, come down here and I'll kill you all. After being narcissistic, Lee Hyun-wook also felt like he was a bit too much, and now he didn't know what to do. The boss came out to fight him head on, so the whole group was also very enthusiastic. His system showed a warning that there was 40% mana left, and Lee Hyun-wook had no other choice. Lee Hyun-wook decided to put all his eggs in one basket. Even though it took time, he had to finish eating them before returning to the station. The two sides were preparing to rush into each other to fight when Lee Hyun-wook heard Park Junmo's call. And the goblin shaman also realized that he smirked and ordered his disciples to attack Park Junmo. The idiot didn't know what was going on and just screamed. Lee Hyun-wook told Park Junmo to lower his head. He took a gun and shot down that monster and then took it from another monster. When they turned around, the goblin shaman and the rest had evaporated. They had escaped. At the same time, the notification sound from the radio on the shoulder also rang out. The army on the other side had begun to move, and they heard gunshots, so they made an announcement. Lee Hyun-wook had no choice but to report the situation. A barrier appeared in the area and determined that the monsters were goblins. After the first encounter, the goblins left the current area, and the current fort number 5 had no casualties. The other side issued a notice asking Lee Hyun-wook's number 5 station to take a position to protect the station and wait for orders. Lee Hyun-wook knows that person will be here soon. She is the knight of the anti-monster terrorist team, Lieutenant Seo Yunya. If she appears, like in her previous life, she will stop the gate and take away all the weapons. Among them is the legendary adamantium equipment. In the past, this was the ultimate equipment that made people call Lee Hyun-wook the Great Iron Emperor. Missing this time, the next opportunity has to wait another 4 years. If that happens again and everything will return to the way it was in his previous life, Lee Hyun-wook will die again, so he needs to finish work before the reserve team arrives. The goblins need lives, but they won't enter the city center right now. With monsters hunting in groups like goblins, the city density is too high. Suddenly the sound from the radio rang out, and station number 6 was attacked by goblins. Lee Hyun-wook saw that the time had come, and he shouted at the radio that he would go to assist, not listening to the curse on the other side. Park Junmo hugged his thighs and begged Lee Hyun-wook not to do foolish things, against orders from his superiors not only to be arrested by the station but also to be subject to martial law. Lee Hyun-wook didn't listen. Team number 6 only had magicians or gunners, only long-range players, they couldn't deal with the goblins, they would all lose their lives. Park Junmo is still determined to hold on and not let Lee Hyun-wook go. You can't do anything alone. Lee Hyun-wook doesn't think it's right, he's not alone, there's Park Junmo too. Park Junmo is shocked, are you kidding me? Meanwhile, Fort number 6 was in extreme chaos, quite a few people had been taken down, and the commander continued to order Fort 6 to protect the position with his life. The monsters had already penetrated deep inside, they competed to kill each other. Many people were covered in blood and extremely seriously injured, they only knew where to hide in the trunk waiting to die. Suddenly, a small pile of rocks outside rushed into the glass door, and the 2 soldiers inside were scared to death. The boss of this group is so smart, after this box is broken, they will all die. One corporal held a gun and pointed it at himself, intending to commit suicide, the other could only cry. Suddenly the sound came from inside the radio. The person on the radio told Park, after raising the crossbow, to aim at the light and shoot and stand still. Park didn't understand anything but followed suit, he had no other choice but to do as the person on the radio said. He raised his crossbow and aimed straight at the light. The person on the other side of the walkie-talkie was none other than Lee Hyun-wook. He put a flashlight on his shoulder as a signal, and he told the craft not to practice aiming, he would be the one to pull the trigger. Lee Hyun-wook controlled the trigger, a fire-torn arrow flew out and shot at the monster. That monster burned, and the system announced that he had just consumed 1% of his mana. Lee Hyun-wook has found a way to save mana, plus the extremely strong firepower of the crafts, making the game easy. The fire earlier attracted the attention of the goblin shaman and the monsters. The goblin shaman shot rocks at Lee Hyun-wook, and he jumped into the grass to avoid it. Lee Hyun-wook ordered it to be done again like before. The soldier listened and scrambled to prepare the crossbow. He once again raised his crossbow towards the light. Lee Hyun-wook was the one pulling the trigger, and each monster burned one by one. The goblin shaman gritted his teeth madly. Lee Hyun-wook's best brother, Park Junmo, was still hiding in the bushes. His mission was just to send a signal. Lee Hyun-wook said he would only distract them, but looking at the situation, it seemed like it was about to be completely destroyed. Suddenly a goblin saw Park Junmo and the monster raised its knife to cut it down when Lee Hyun-wook was able to arrive. He pulled the trigger of the downed monster. Park Junmo gasped, Lee Hyun-wook now and before is really the same person. All Lee Hyun-wook did just now was to lure boss the goblin shaman out, but he still silently assessed the situation. His mana is down to only 12%, that one hasn't appeared yet, is it letting its troops fall one by one? Suddenly, Park Junmo's cry for help rang out on the radio. Lee Hyun-wook rushed over. The goblin shaman captured Park Junmo and threatened him with him. Lee Hyun-wook pretended to let go of his weapon and surrendered. He smiled crookedly and controlled the trigger to shoot. The goblin shaman was hit by a bullet, and vomited blood. He took the opportunity to rush up and throw the knife at the goblin shaman who was running away. But the knife that touched the monster popped out. This one put on a coat so the knife was difficult to penetrate. The system continued to warn. Lee Hyun-wook's mana had dropped to 9%. The goblin shaman ran for life. It ran towards the gate. Seeing that the goblin shaman was about to enter the gate, Lee Hyun-wook suddenly looked out that the goblin shaman's necklace had steel, and he did not hesitate to use his metal control skills to pull the monster back. His mana dropped to only 2%. Lee Hyun-wook threw a knife and stabbed the goblin shaman in the face. His mana was exhausted just in time. The monster was defeated. A golden light shot up to brighten the sky. Lee Hyun-wook swore, Lieutenant Seo Yunya is here. Lee Hyun-wook immediately searched for the stone on the goblin shaman's body. Just in time to find it and put it in his mouth. The army surrounded him. They pointed guns to ask for his identity, and Lee Hyun-wook raised his hand to surrender, honestly declaring his name. Seo Yunya walked through the gate and saw that the boss had been taken down, so she was surprised that 4 ordinary soldiers could take down a boss. Unbelievable. And yet, all the monsters were injured identically. This was done by one person. Lee Hyun-wook was placed on a stretcher to carry him back. The system announced that he had successfully absorbed the legendary item adamantium, taking 9 hours to absorb the whole thing. Lee Hyun-wook covered his face and smiled happily. The system added more information. The metal he had just absorbed was of the enhanced type, and after absorption, there would be magic skills similar to the enhanced type. After absorption, the block absorbing the expected increase in the amount of metal has not been determined. Seo Yunya also found it difficult to understand how Lee Hyun-wook could still smile. Lee Hyun-wook was as happy as if he had just won the lottery. His system appeared again, after absorbing the legendary item. A rare skill has appeared. Now he can detect all the metals within the control skill range. This day finally came. Lee Hyun-wook finally got it back, and he could feel the magnetic field of the metal around him resonating. Today is the Great Iron Emperor's official return to his throne. A few days after the incident at the barracks gate, rumors spread a lot. The story of an F-rank corporal appeared with a huge sword killing goblins. However, many people do not believe the rumors. Typically this young man, Sergeant Oh Sang-guk, the magician of the Special Intelligence Magic Division commanded by Team Number 2. His subordinates reported it to him but were bullied and angry. Oh Sang-guk turned to the fat guy next to him again and asked, "If you can tear the goblin with your bare hands, can you bring 3 other people to attack a gate?" The fat guy firmly replied that he couldn't. This fat guy was Oh Sang-guk's close henchman, Private Lee Won-suk, a crazy person in a close combat group, a high-ranking expert with one rank D, considered rank C. They didn't there was anyone who witnessed the F-rank group taking down the monster with their own eyes. So they thought it was just the ones falling behind the goblins, but if a rank F really went crazy, it would be dangerous to the military order. When the fat guy heard this, he also understood what his superiors wanted. In the battalion commander's room, Lee Hyun-wook was summoned, so worried that he sweated out. If everything went well, they could completely turn a blind eye. Why would they call him over? The people in the current battalion commander's room, in addition to Seo Yunya, also include Lieutenant Lee Min-hee, rank C magician, and battalion commander Lieutenant Major Kim Kang-seok, who plays rank B. The lieutenant sternly questioned Lee Hyun-wook if he disobeyed orders to delay and deliberately repel the first round of the gate. This lieutenant is known as the Mountain King of Namsan, ranked 166th in Korea. If you miss your word now, you will be suspended immediately. Lee Hyun-wook took a deep breath to reassure himself. He has to stay calm. At most, he has to be guarded. He eloquently admitted that he saw the gate open while in position and reacted immediately. The battalion commander asked in return. He had read the report but still did not understand. Under normal circumstances, an F-rank soldier like Lee Hyun-wook was torn apart. Lee Hyun-wook swallowed. The pressure was terrible. If he backs down now, his military career will be shattered. He began to confide that he was unfair, feeling like he had been deceived. Lieutenant Lee Min-hee was about to raise the alarm when the battalion commander stopped him. He wanted to hear Lee Hyun-wook continue. Lee Hyun-wook gained momentum. He asked the battalion commander every time they trained. They emphasized no matter how low their rank was. If they can apply the monster strategy of their legion, even if it is rank D, even rank E, they can fight them. Lee Hyun-wook said in one go, according to the battalion commander's training, even if an F rank like him would probably struggle against a troll, a goblin would not be impossible. Even though he really went against the commander's orders, if he hadn't come to help station number 6, all the staff would have lost their lives. Having finished speaking, Lee Hyun-wook also felt satisfied. After the rational part, he would now turn to the love song. Lee Hyun-wook repeated what the battalion commander taught earlier. That's why every rank soldier is a soldier, always fighting hard as a real soldier. Lee Hyun-wook said unashamedly, the battalion commander is someone you always respect. I took advantage of what I had been trained in and tried my best to do it with my teammates when my life was threatened. The only reason I can confidently move forward when I'm looked down upon as an F rank is because of that statement from the battalion commander. Lee Hyun-wook took the opportunity to bow his head and explain, so when he heard the battalion commander deny that, he felt like his whole career was just a lie. That's why he felt like he had been deceived. Lee Hyun-wook knew very well that as soon as battalion commander Major Kim Kang-seok took office as deputy lieutenant, the gates began to open, and he almost lost his life in the battle with Org. But without the slightest hesitation returned to the army and became an early corps member of the terror squad in Monsters. In other words, he was a true soldier. Lee Hyun-wook was extremely confident. He said he saw what he said as an image and risked his life for his teammates. How dare he suspend him? As expected, the battalion commander was excited. He patted Lee Hyun-wook on the shoulder and officially appointed him to accept the position of non-commissioned officer. Lee Hyun-wook's system appeared to announce and congratulate the player on satisfying special conditions and achieving new skills. The skill, which bears his name Copper and Iron Skin, uses mana to temporarily strengthen parts of the body. Lee Hyun-wook was speechless, and Seo Yunya and Lee Min-hee standing on the other side were just helpless. Lee Hyun-wook was looked at by the battalion commander as he was surprised and so stressed that he was sweating profusely. He didn't think everything would come to this point. Did he hear wrong? At the 3rd Brigade, 1st Battalion Station, in the gym, Lee Hyun-wook lifted weights and cursed. He angrily threw the weights down. He harmed himself, damn it. At that time, Lee Min-hee also persuaded the battalion commander to withdraw the decision, because in the history of the anti-terrorism team there had never been a non-commissioned officer ranked F. Thanks to platoon leader Lee Min-hee, Lee Hyun-wook had the opportunity to say he would consider it, but he should live in hiding for a while to avoid attracting attention. While I was upset, two guys were bored living somewhere to cause trouble. The fat guy approached him and asked if he had finished using the weights. He replied that he hadn't finished using them yet. The fat guy stared at him. His attitude changed completely. He single-handedly lifted the weights, mocking the recently famous Lee Hyun-wook who could only lift this much weight. It was so humiliating. Thanks to the fat guy's loud mouth, the other people in the gym noticed this side, and they all stopped waiting. Lee Hyun-wook looked over and realized that one of them was the trash Oh Sang-guk. He immediately knew that that guy would openly bully him again like in his previous life. It was annoying. Lee Hyun-wook scratched his head and thought, he just planned to live in hiding without attracting attention. It's annoying. He finally returned to solo with the fat guy. The entire corps noisily discussed rumors that Lee Won-suk and Rank Private F Lee Hyun-wook were preparing to fight. The crowd gathered around the ring, and the two main characters were also there. The fat guy rushed up and punched Lee Hyun-wook until he pulled away. He raised his hand to block the attack. He tried to dodge each attack from the fat guy who was almost punched in the face once, but luckily he reacted in time, saving his handsome face. Lee Hyun-wook provoked, the fat guy got mad. At that moment, Lieutenant Chun Myung-ho, tactical training officer of the Black Tiger unit, also entered. He was seduced by a soldier and led inside to watch the match between Lee Hyun-wook and the fat guy. The officer next to him kept talking. The attacks were as if they had been dealt by heaven. The lieutenant didn't pay much attention to the words the wind blew in the other officer's ear. He stood outside to consider the situation. There were people in the audience below who couldn't wait anymore. Someone shouted to the fat guy, "Stop playing, let's finish quickly." The others also shouted and told the fat guy to hit him quickly. "Don't play around anymore, you've lost all your bets." The fat guy standing on the field is also very pressured. He hasn't given up until now. His body is now as heavy as wearing weights, and it's difficult to move and fight anymore. Lee Hyun-wook had been waving his hands up and down, with his ability to control metal. You made the metal pile on the fat guy's shoe keep holding him down, so the fat guy couldn't hit you at all. He waved his arms and legs non-stop. Now the fat guy would have felt like he was fighting and moving in the swamp. Lee Hyun-wook doesn't have to do anything, standing there laughing is about to win. The fat guy suddenly called out to stop. He called his feet a bit strange. Lee Hyun-wook pretended not to know how to ask, "Are you suddenly like that?" He said a few more provocative words. The fat guy was furious. He tied his abs and strained his ass to explode his inner strength, and his outer shirt was also torn apart. The people below were amazed. The fat guy used the crazy man's physical enhancement skills, the armor skills, and he breathed like a cow. Lee Hyun-wook was also in a serious state. The lieutenant standing below was about to stop him. Strengthening his body like this was no longer a normal match. But looking at Lee Hyun-wook's eyes, he didn't seem to flinch at all. He stood and watched first, not stopping him. Fat guy and Lee Hyun-wook are like a fierce buffalo fighting a leopard intentionally hiding its fangs and waiting for the opportunity. The lieutenant finds this match interesting. The officer next to him spoke cheerfully. He constantly praised the fat guy who was not a normal person, rank D but enhanced his body, the first time he witnessed it. The fat guy wanted to end the match quickly. After strengthening him many times faster than before, he quickly punched Lee Hyun-wook and hit him into the field. The crowd below cheered on the fat guy that no one knew. Only the fat guy after punching him felt like he was punching iron and steel. Just now, Lee Hyun-wook used the skill of strengthening his body, turning part of his arm into steel to block the attack. This time it was his turn to counterattack. The fat guy went crazy. He rushed to attack again. Lee Hyun-wook was able to dodge. This great skill to use with someone like this fat guy is truly a pity. Lee Hyun-wook used the skill of strengthening part of his leg to kick the fat guy's calf, and the fat guy fell in pain. Lee Hyun-wook took the opportunity to punch the fat guy in the face. A person who just because of his strength was arrogant was just an ant. Are you going to teach others a lesson, but don't know who is teaching whom? The audience standing below were stunned, not believing their eyes. Lieutenant Chun Myung-ho couldn't believe his eyes. The leopard finally showed its fangs, and it bit the buffalo's neck. The lieutenant was still waiting. Lee Hyun-wook on the other side was still constantly punching the fat guy in the face. The lieutenant was waiting for him to strike the decisive blow. But Lee Hyun-wook was held up by the fat guy carrying his shirt. The fat guy was about to punch Lee Hyun-wook straight to the ground when he used martial arts to clamp his neck tightly. The fat guy couldn't move. If it keeps slamming its opponent down, it will destroy his arm. The lieutenant was still quietly observing. With a crazy person in a state of physical enhancement, that neck clamp would normally not be successful. On the other side, the battle between the two was still going on quite intensely. The fat guy tried his best to escape Lee Hyun-wook's clutch position, and he raised his other hand to punch him. However, Lee Hyun-wook promptly removed the fat man's finger holding his neck. He turned around and dodged the attack. then changed the position to hold the lieutenant's hair, strangling him from behind. The lieutenant silently applauded, turning around and moving to the clasp. That's right, if you press hard on the arteries in your neck, it will be dangerous because crazy people only focus on strengthening their bodies and strengthening their muscles. The fat guy who was strangled by Lee Hyun-wook couldn't escape. He tried his best to remove his hand but couldn't. Lee Hyun-wook smirked. He used the ability to strengthen his body and his arms. There was no way this fat guy could escape. The system appears to warn that the scope of using physical enhancement has exceeded the current sublimit range. But Lee Hyun-wook still didn't stop. He continued to strangle the fatter guy. The system warned again. The crowd below also began to stir. One guy turned to tell Oh Sang-guk not to stop him, and if he fought again, there would be a murder. Even though Lee Hyun-wook's eyes were bloodshot, and his nose was bleeding, he still didn't let go. His eyes looked straight at Oh Sang-guk behind him. You son of a bitch, this is considered a warning to you. Oh Sang-guk, when he looked at him, his sweat was flowing. The fat guy had a vague consciousness, and he was about to lose to a trash guy. The fat guy gritted his teeth and tried again. It was considered the trump card of the next generation, but he couldn't lose so miserably. The fat guy once again strengthened his body, and the lieutenant on the other side stood and watched excitedly. Surprisingly, Rank D strengthened his body twice, but if he couldn't escape that neck lock, the end would be his own tightening. The other side was fighting fiercely. Lee Hyun-wook also tightened his grip. The fat guy shouted to escape but still couldn't escape. Too late, the fat guy collapsed. The lieutenant was extremely excited. He guessed correctly that Lee Hyun-wook was a real beast. The others came to see the fat guy's condition. Luckily he was still breathing, just fainted. Park Junmo happily rushed to hug Lee Hyun-wook to congratulate him on his victory. Lee Hyun-wook didn't care, so he pushed Park Junmo away, his eyes still staring at the bastard Oh Sang-guk standing behind without saying a word. Lieutenant Chun Myung-ho approached and asked his name. Lee Hyun-wook entered the military standard position to declare his name. He also found it strange that this person was here. The lieutenant also greeted him back. He introduced himself to the Black Tiger Unit Vehicle Tactical Training Center. He had just watched his battle, and he gave him a black card, inviting him and the Special Operations Unit. After listening, everyone else was also excited. The Black Tiger Unit was the strongest unit in the anti-monster terrorist team. Lee Hyun-wook refused without hesitation. He was just an F-rank player, not suitable for this place. Lieutenant Chun Myung-ho is not considered right. Rank is just a standard set by ordinary people. They need a strong soldier like Lee Hyun-wook. Lee Hyun-wook cried in his heart. He was in pain, and he collapsed, one side and then the other. Everyone forced him to stay. The army was a strict environment. Lieutenant Chun Myung-ho asked him again if he would join. Lee Hyun-wook sadly looked at the black card. Surely later when confronting the villain army he would be held back by the Special Corps. He took the card and said he would try to think again. Now find an excuse to keep his distance first. Oh Sang-guk stood to the side and saw that this recruitment was immediately crazy and angry. In the battalion commander's room, the battalion commander and lieutenant sat and talked, drinking tea together. The battalion commander asked the lieutenant if there had been any problems with the Black Tiger unit recently. Lieutenant Chun Myung-ho sipped a cup of tea. He said this side is always in difficulty because of lack of manpower. Battalion Commander Kim Kang-seok also understands that lately everyone just needs to reach rank C and the association has already recruited them, so there is no other way. Wholeheartedly training talented people and then everything was taken away by the outside world. Both of them had the same fate. The two looked at each other and understood. The battalion commander asked the lieutenant to come here for soldier Choi Young-jun. Lieutenant Chun Myung-ho also happily replied yes. Choi Young-jun was on leave but, thanks to that he found an interesting soldier. After hearing this, the battalion commander was startled and let go of his cup of tea. Lee Hyun-wook was being chased around the yard by Park Jun-moo. This boy kept clinging to him for ways to become stronger. Lee Hyun-wook is tired and about to die. This ridiculous action of two people was seen by the battalion commander standing in the room. He pulled out his phone to contact one person, asking that person to find out what he was doing before Lee Hyun-wook joined the army. He didn't want to do that either, but it was because Lieutenant Chun Myung-ho made him greedy. The city is bustling, people pass by, and bustling with joy. A child who goes with his mother, because he keeps playing, chases a monkey, the animal runs into a small alley, and the boy chases the monkey. But the monkey the baby saw was not an ordinary monkey, it was a terrifying claw monster, not just one but thousands and thousands of them came out of the gate. At the battalion's arsenal, Lee Hyun-wook was being led by Seo Yunya to explore. The battalion commander recognized his achievements, so he rewarded him with weapons and gave him a leave of absence, but the small chief did not believe he could do that. Lee Hyun-wook cursed silently. in his previous life, that little change leader was also difficult, but this life is no different. Lee Hyun-wook said whether he believed it or not, he could have done it. Seo Yunya turned around and told him not to be so confident. The goblins at the gate had all been killed by the same sword strike, meaning a guard had stopped the first attack himself. Lee Hyun-wook didn't seem to care much about Seo Yunya's words. He raised a sword to tell him to choose this bar. Seo Yunya told him to choose carefully. Don't choose as if she was forcing you, think carefully, and then choose. Lee Hyun-wook swung his sword up and down. He was very satisfied with this sword. This is the sort of cloud that absorbs water and then creates a mist that covers the eyes of its opponents. Now this sword looks like an unsightly miscellaneous item, but later Sergeant Choi Young-jun, thanks to this sword, was honored as a holy sword. The real name of this sword is Hidden Cloud Assassin in Dangun mythology, the three weather gods who accompanied Hwang Wung to the lower world, Wind Lord, Rain Master, and Cloud Master. In which the god who rules the clouds, Cloud Master, along with his sword called Haunting Master, has done many things. Hidden Cloud Assassin is understood as the blade hidden in the clouds, or in other words, it is a lightning strike. If you know how to take advantage of its potential, you can use the power of lightning, strong enough to raid the medium-sized monster's vault alone. Lee Hyun-wook is extremely satisfied with this sword. The combination of steel and lightning is the best, and this time he will take this sword. Seo Yunya complained that with such classy achievements, she only took that fragile sword. Lee Hyun-wook still refused to change his decision. Suddenly alarm bells rang throughout the military region, alarming at a Taeun gate. Seo Yunya looked at Lee Hyun-wook and was surprised. How could he be so calm? It was as if I knew this in advance. The army quickly regrouped, and the Chunhwa Guild wearing silver armor also arrived. This association has good spear shirts and weapons. Just sell a coat and you can buy a building in Gangnam. Lee Hyun-wook also commanded a small army. He reminded his subordinates to be careful of even small monsters. Those animals can also cause more casualties than the Battle of Oak. They mainly use needles and poison gas to attack. It is strictly forbidden to roll up the sleeves of combat uniforms while on the battlefield. A soldier at the top of the line hurriedly pulled down his sleeve. Didn't he understand how to be so careful? Lee Hyun-wook asked the other soldier if he wanted to have his eyes gouged out by a kobold. The other soldier was silent and did not dare to ask anything more. Lee Hyun-wook reminded everyone to prepare to deal with toxic gases and to remember to check to make sure it is easy to wear a gas mask in an emergency. Soldiers from other detachments came from somewhere. They competed sarcastically, a waste army that also had to learn how to discuss battle plans. Everyone who looked at it thought the reinforcements were racing to participate in the fight. Lee Hyun-wook's soldiers bent down to meet each other and did not dare to argue. Lee Hyun-wook was upset. He turned around and scolded the other two guys for not checking their gas masks but running around. The kobolds often left the territory during dungeon raids to attack. The other two didn't care at all. They were confident they were people with combat experience. After they smiled, got bored and left, Lee Hyun-wook looked back at his army and saw that everyone had their minds down. He gritted his teeth and raised his voice. Everyone stood at attention. He gave a speech to lift his spirits again. They had heard those sarcastic words so many times. Now that they are in a real situation where they can die at any time, now is not the time to lose their minds. The soldiers on Lee Hyun-wook's team adjusted their standing posture and waited for orders. Lee Hyun-wook continued to advise that the kobolds were quite small, so this motion detection sensor had to be attached to all drainage ports and narrow passages. He asked the soldiers to complete the mission within 20 minutes, and the soldiers hurriedly shared to work. After all the other soldiers left, only Lee Hyun-wook and Park Junmo moved the boxes. Park Junmo also found Lee Hyun-wook a bit sensitive today. Lee Hyun-wook stared at Park Junmo, recalling his past life. Lee Hyun-wook was about to ask what Park Junmo had just said when suddenly an arrow stuck straight into his neck. Lee Hyun-wook fell to the ground. The kobolds jumped out from nowhere. They released a pile of poison gas, and many soldiers promptly pulled out gas masks and put them on. But these monkeys were so fast and so dangerous. They jumped into the poisonous smoke that bit so many soldiers. Lee Hyun-wook was still lying on the ground. He still couldn't remove the arrow stuck in his neck. Suddenly the monkey's boss appeared behind him, holding a knife and poking him straight in the face. But luckily, as soon as the tip of the knife passed, someone came to save him. Lee Hyun-wook's face was slit a long way to the ear. The person who just arrived was Park Junmo. He wanted to give Lee Hyun-wook a gas mask, but Lee Hyun-wook told him to run away quickly. The two struggled for a while when Park Junmo was hit by a monster. Lee Hyun-wook shouted desperately. In his previous life, Park Junmo was killed by the monster Kobold. Just before the Kobolds arrived, he ordered Park Junmo to take the battalion members out of the combat area. He would send a combat signal to Park Junmo later. This is Lee Hyun-wook's strategy. On the other side of the region, reports are continuously sent to Delta Team reports, Zones 1 and 3 no one reports anymore. Team Epsilon also reported areas 4, 5, and 6 with no survivors. Team Gamma reported no survivors in the early stages of the Red Ground campaign. Team Beta reported finding a Kobold lair in Area 2, Division B9. There are an estimated 200 Kobolds. The army commanded a strategic ambush. They entered Area A after giving the signal. The soldiers at the same time broke through the door and entered. They set up shields, started the magic circle, and then returned to wait as ordered by their superiors. When the Kobolds saw someone breaking in, they rushed forward to attack. The army waited for the monkeys to approach and signaled to fire. A fire erupted from the magic circle, burning many Kobolds. Currently, Lee Hyun-wook's team was still busy placing sensors. Lieutenant Lee Min-hee went to look into the situation and asked what he was doing. Lee Hyun-wook respectfully replied that he was installing the drive sensor as instructed and marking its location with aluminum tape. Lee Min-hee complained it cost too much money. Don't worry too much because the Manhwa Association had to send reinforcements just to deal with the Kobold gate. Platoon 1 will depart in 20 minutes, so the reinforcements must provide detoxifiers or antidote supplies. Lee Hyun-wook argued that the military support they received from the platoon leader was to prevent the monsters from running towards the residential area on the back line. Lee Hyun-wook deliberately shouted loudly so he would attract everyone's attention. Lee Min-hee doesn't want to be embarrassed, he sarcastically said. The platoon leader has only treated you well once, but now you can do whatever you like, without any life experience. The two struggled for a while and someone came looking for them. This pink-haired girl is Sergeant Choi Sho-ha. She is a C-rank player, a witch who specializes in healing. Lee Min-hee, who was arrogant, also regained his arrogant attitude, making Lee Hyun-wook laugh. Lee Hyun-wook chuckled. This is Lee Min-hee's weakness, because his crush appeared so he became less aggressive. Lee Min-hee shyly asked Choi Sho-ha if something was wrong. She now remembered the main story. Choi Sho-ha told the battalion commander to call Lee Hyun-wook. Lee Hyun-wook found it strange. Why did he call him? At the same time, on Seo Yunya's side, she was using binoculars to monitor the situation on Lee Hyun-wook's side. Choi Sho-ha told him to go see the squad leader, where she would be responsible for installing sensors. Lee Hyun-wook was upset, worried that time was running out, and wondering what the hell the battalion commander was thinking. Seo Yunya's group was still standing on the roof and preparing to fight, when a soldier looking down spoke up. They were the attack force directly receiving orders from the battalion commander, perhaps that's why they were summoned in her attack. Seo Yunya put down her binoculars. They were simply soldiers, having to obey orders from her superiors. At the temporary command of the battalion commander, Lee Hyun-wook came to meet the battalion commander and also met Lieutenant Chun Myung-ho. He seriously greeted the two people, still wondering what the school battalion wanted from him. The battalion commander looked at him seriously. He wanted to test him once. Because Choi Young-jun is on leave, Lee Hyun-wook will temporarily take on the role of commander of the 1st platoon and perform attack support duties at the gate. Lee Hyun-wook was surprised. The name that had never cared about him in his previous life had just said something. You don't have time for this. Lee Hyun-wook tried to hold on. He said that since being assigned to this platoon, he had only performed tasks in the support and support detachment. He couldn't accept putting the lives of the first team members into such a dangerous test. It wasn't even a training session, it was a real combat situation. The battalion commander just looked at him coldly and said this was an order. Lee Hyun-wook gritted his teeth bitterly without daring to speak. At that moment, the announcement came from the radio, and information from the Delta team, the boss of the Kobolds, had left the nest. Lee Hyun-wook also heard this announcement. The Kobolds will soon attack the support detachment if you don't go now. The rear defense line will be attacked. He gritted his teeth and made up his mind that he had to leave there immediately. Lee Hyun-wook decided to tell the battalion commander that he had something to say. Outside, Seo Yunya was still holding binoculars to follow Lee Hyun-wook. She saw him running away and being chased by a ghost after leaving the command room. Lee Hyun-wook shouted and told the support team to be careful of toxic gas. The red warning also rang out at the same time. A cloud of toxic smoke radiated everywhere. Lee Hyun-wook could not have predicted that the Kobolds would arrive much faster than he remembered in his previous life. While in the room earlier, Lee Hyun-wook confided to the battalion commander. He heard that the battalion commander had lost all members of his unit on the first mission. It's hard to believe that he comes from a military support background and is treated like a lowly soldier. Yet now, the battalion commander ordered him to participate in a real battle just to test him. Lee Hyun-wook asked the battalion commander in return if the respected battalion commander also considered ordinary soldiers to be disposable items. The battalion commander, who was touched, was also startled. He denied it and then turned around to assign him to follow the attack platoon under his command. Lee Hyun-wook interrupted the battalion commander, eloquently declaring that if it was the battalion commander's order, he would like to listen. But who knows, he's confused in his heart. He can't say he knows the future, damn it. Lee Hyun-wook continued to say that he lacked real combat experience, especially in leading a platoon he had never been in contact with. There was a high possibility that there would be casualties. He was very grateful that the battalion commander had relied on him, but if the price to pay was the lives of his comrades, then he would like to go against orders. The battalion commander silently bowed his face without saying anything. Lieutenant Chun Myung-ho stood next to him and warned Lee Hyun-wook, disobeying orders during the war to face the death penalty. Lee Hyun-wook of course knows this, but if he doesn't go now, all the back lines will die. The battalion commander, who had been silent all this time, also spoke up. He withdrew his order. Today Lee Hyun-wook will carry out the original mission in the support detachment as planned. However, as a true soldier, the punishment against the order will be enforced in the future and each individual will take the consequences upon himself. Lee Hyun-wook ran and put on his gas mask while cursing, "Damn bastard." Lee Hyun-wook took out the sword from the bag. He poured some water on it. Currently, the vision has been completely neutralized by toxic gases. Lee Hyun-wook silently prayed that Park Junmo had run away with the others. Contrary to Lee Hyun-wook's wishes, Park Junmo did not take people away and also took troops to support other teams. He told everyone to quickly let the injured people enter the military base and retreat. Pink-haired girl Choi Shoha is also on the battlefield. She trembled and couldn't move. Park Junmo urged her to heal quickly, but because she was so scared, she couldn't do it. He was also shaking. His gun handle shook with every beat. Choi Shoha was only 20 years old. He knew this was her first time participating in battle after being assigned to this party. But you're just a lowly soldier in this support division, so what else can you do? Unlike others, they also began to run out of bullets and could not withstand them. Park Junmo also has a headache. Should they have to die here? Suddenly, he thought of Lee Hyun-wook. Park Junmo followed the male lead's example and gave orders to the support team. When Kobold is attracted to glowing objects, he will use lightning attacks to attract those monsters. Then all the platoon went with the sergeant and took the wounded with them and left this place immediately. After listening to Park Junmo's orders, Park Junmo was stunned. Park Junmo was still determined to take everyone away. They had to get to the evacuation area, where they would meet the Manhwa Association there. Park Junmo knows his electronic skills cannot kill the weakest monster. But in the end, he was able to use it to save everyone. Park Junmo held a glowing hammer and ran in another direction. The monsters were attracted by the light in his hand, so they chased him at the same time. Park Junmo shouted loudly for everyone to run away. He believed that he had done the right thing. If Lee Hyun-wook here would do the same, he decided to use this body as bait. Suddenly, the monsters chased after him. Park Junmo was beaten to pieces by one blow. Lee Hyun-wook arrived in time. He used the Sword of Cloud to absorb water and create an aquatic mist, neutralizing toxic gases within the range of the aquatic mist. Lee Hyun-wook called Park Junmo, thanking him for surviving. Park Junmo was touched, with tears in his eyes. Thanks to Park Junmo, Lee Hyun-wook can now survive. Lee Hyun-wook swung his sword and took down a bunch of kobold monsters. Some red gems fell out. He looked at it with regret. Because Park Junmo was here, he couldn't eat it. Fighting for a while is still just a bunch of trash. The leader has not yet been revealed. Suddenly there was a loud howl. The monsters turned and ran in the opposite direction. Lee Hyun-wook shouted at Park Junmo to run away quickly. Their detachment was in danger. On the other side, the poison gas had not yet dissipated, and visibility became difficult. At this rate, she couldn't help. Seo Yunya put on her mask. She orders her subordinates to stay where they are and, working with the Chunwai team, snip the kobolds to prevent them from leaving the area in front of poison gas and reaching the civilians. Seo Yunya, after she finished wearing the mask, also jumped into the smoke. She needed to check a few things. Lee Hyun-wook's actions were like he already knew everything. Choi Shoha was crying endlessly. There were too many dead and injured people around. The rescue facility protecting them also began to crack, and the boss's magic was too strong. Some soldiers were trying to keep the base from breaking, but it didn't work, because the base was cracked open, and the kobolds were flooding in. Chasing the monsters was Lee Hyun-wook, who held his sword and threw it straight towards the boss. It leaned forward and dodged. The sword redirected in the other direction, following the boss to the end. Lee Hyun-wook's sword wiped through the vase on the back of the poisonous gas monster that leaked a little out. The monster was upset and ordered his subordinates to step back. They lined up to shoot arrows at Lee Hyun-wook. He used his sword to knock the arrows away, defending and fighting to protect Park Junmo. Lee Hyun-wook used his metal control skills to control the number of arrows that turned his head and shot back toward the monsters. The system warned that the sword M7 he had just thrown towards the boss had lost control. But now Lee Hyun-wook didn't have time to pay attention to that. He was struggling with the remaining Kobold subordinates. These bastards listened to the boss's command to attack everyone. If he keeps attacking like this, he will scare them and will buy more time for others. If you take Park Junmo to attack the boss, it will be too dangerous. Lee Hyun-wook ordered Park Junmo to gradually retreat towards the base, and the two turned around and ran for their lives. The monsters continued to shoot arrows later. Lee Hyun-wook used all his metal control skills to neutralize them, and the two successfully returned to the base with the other soldiers. The situation in the security base is also very chaotic. The injured person has no first aid skills, and the wounded magician is panicking, suffering psychological trauma. If this continues, the entire army will die. Lee Hyun-wook approached Choi Shoha, told her to wake up. Now the situation is urgent, and everyone is screwed up. After a while of mental work, Choi Shoha finally calmed down and she began treating the injured. Even though the deputy captain's condition is not very good and there is a lot of blood flowing, Choi Shoha will still try his best to save him. Lee Hyun-wook uses metal control skills. Self-consciously taking everyone's knives, you will make the monkeys out there pay the price. Somewhere, a woman with a spider on her shoulder was sitting in a luxury car. After receiving the call, she asked the driver to drive straight to Itaewon. Lee Hyun-wook held out a knife alone and went solo with the Kobolds. He determined where to place the sensors and then looked around again. It was best for the prey to crawl into the hunting location. He marked and installed the sensor in the location he wanted in the center of this place. The main error range is the part of Area A commanded by the deputy squad leader. The leader will control from behind. As long as he finds it, this game will end. Lee Hyun-wook uses metal detection skills to search. If there is any metal that he does not know outside Area A, it is the boss. Lee Hyun-wook controlled the knives to stab the hidden kobolds directly. One knife pointed straight at the boss in the back. The boss casts magic against the strange knife. Lee Hyun-wook, after determining the boss's position, controls the other knives also towards it. The boss of the kobolds monkeys stopped. The boss performed magic, and simultaneously neutralized Lee Hyun-wook's knives. He tried to control and bring the knives back but the knives were trapped. The system shows a warning. The M7 knife has a weight beyond the controllable weight. The other little monsters took the opportunity, simultaneously shooting darts at Lee Hyun-wook. He raised his hand against the darts. The boss ordered the monsters to rush up at the same time. Lee Hyun-wook thought he would be hit like in his previous life. Like this time he had the skill to strengthen his body, so he was hit by a dart and was unharmed. Lee Hyun-wook called the knives back, and he controlled them to spin, creating a large tornado that wiped out those subordinates. The last one left is the boss. It's a black magician. Now you're going to kill this one. The boss gritted his teeth. It spewed poison gas again. Lee Hyun-wook used his sword to protect himself from poisonous smoke. He used his metal sensing skills to recognize his surroundings. If this time he carelessly swung his sword like last time, he would be grabbed by it, and he had to attack carefully. He wondered why that boss didn't have any movement. But as soon as he stood up, he realized that the black magician had performed magic, locked his legs, and as soon as he stood up, he fell back to the ground. The magic control boss wrapped around one of his legs and pulled him towards it. Lee Hyun-wook shouted. It threw him straight into the poisonous smoke. While the boss was at his pleasure, Lee Hyun-wook returned. Thanks to his body strengthening skills, his legs were okay. I'm a bit annoyed. Several times today, this damn monkey has shocked me so much. The boss continued to emit toxic gas, but it quickly disappeared and ran out of something else. Soon it appeared behind Lee Hyun-wook. It stabbed its sword at him, but he quickly dodged. Lee Hyun-wook was angry. This bitch was still playing a stabbing game as if being poked in a painful place. Lee Hyun-wook was angry. He slashed his sword straight down on the monster's head. Lee Hyun-wook also activated his body strengthening skill on his leg. He raised his leg and broke the monster's face. The boss flew away. Lee Hyun-wook had been waiting for a long time at this moment. Since the first night after returning to the past, he had been thinking about how to take revenge on backstabbers like these damn monkeys. The boss had his mask broken by one. Now he can't use magic anymore. Now let's get to work. Lee Hyun-wook controlled a series of knives to stab the boss straight into the body. The toxic gas tank on its back broke, and it was also seriously injured. Lee Hyun-wook approached. He squeezed the boss's face and lifted it up. He had been bitter about this one for a long time, and because of it, he had to live like a waste for several years in his previous life. The swords he used to stab the boss earlier were the swords of the team member he killed in his previous life. Now let him cook. Lee Hyun-wook held the Sword of Cloud and crashed straight into the boss. The system appeared to announce that the sword was absorbing the monster's vitality. Lee Hyun-wook hasn't let go yet. He controls another knife to stab the monster in the head. This is the price he had to pay for the scar on his face in his previous life. The boss was tortured to death. In the end, the first knot in the past that had made Lee Hyun-wook miserable all this time had been changed. An item is dropped, and the system appears announcing the receipt of the Inferno Demon Medal, which is the Medal of Hellfire. The seal of the demon race's power is one of the list of high-level items of the Divine Medal series. Lee Hyun-wook bewilderedly picked up the medal. Why did this item appear here? This was that person's item. That guy's undead army was like hell to the living. One of humanity's most terrifying villains, Necromancer, hadn't discovered anything clear about that guy yet, but he knew that he had an extraordinary trait like you. Because of him, since he returned to the past, he always had to hide the fact that even though he was ranked F, he could still grow his strength even more. Non-growth characteristics are those that develop in their own way, not through training and combat. In his previous life, after Lee Hyun-wook ended a fierce battle with Necromancer, with a narrow victory at the Golem factory, what he received was at most Inferno replica, just restored goods. Like this time he was holding the real thing in his hand, there were still so many things he didn't know. As the poison gradually dissipated, Lee Hyun-wook opened his mouth to swallow the Inferno medal when suddenly Seo Yunya appeared from behind. She just looked towards him and asked who he was. Lee Hyun-wook was startled and slim. She had seen so much in the last battle, and at that moment someone came. She was the woman sitting in the luxury car with the spider from earlier. She was Hae Yu, head of the Seoul Strategy Department of the Manhwa Association. Lee Hyun-wook hurriedly put his things behind his bag. Seo Yunya asked what he was hiding, but he quickly denied it. Hae Yu had now witnessed Lee Hyun-wook's entire battle. She also recognized Seo Yunya. She was the third daughter of the Knight Commander. Hae Yu didn't pay attention to Seo Yunya's warning. She approached Lee Hyun-wook and gave him the business card. Hae Yu is the second daughter of the Chanhwa guild leader, who plays rank A. Lee Hyun-wook was stunned and did not react. Hae Yu asked him if he didn't know her. Lee Hyun-wook gritted his teeth. How could he not know that among the villains who destroyed humanity, he could not forget this Hae Yu? In her previous life, Seo Yunya sacrificed herself to become a shield for him. This Hae Yu killed her. Returning to the present, Hae Yu was still seducing Lee Hyun-wook. Seo Yunya shouted that this was a military combat zone, wanting that girl to go. Hae Yu let out a breath, walked over, and told Seo Yunya to call her the head of strategy at Chanhwa Association. The two girls stared at each other, and even Lee Hyun-wook felt that the atmosphere between these two was scary. At that moment, another car came, and the next person was the squad leader. He got out of the car, looked around, and saw the monsters and all the kobolds had been taken down. Lee Hyun-wook was startled. Why hadn't the platoon commander arrived yet? Battalion Commander Kim Kang-seok bowed his head politely to ask Hae Yu. They were grateful for the help of the Chanhwa Association, but this was a military combat area. Even if she comes from the Chanhwa Association, illegally entering the combat area without consent will be very troublesome. The battalion commander politely invited Hae Yu to get out of there. Hae Yu waved her business card and grumbled. Just act like no one knows you're a soldier, really rigid. Hae Yu kissed the business card she was holding in her hand, then gave it to Lee Hyun-wook, reminding him to contact her. After Hae Yu left, squad leader Kim Kang-seok directly appointed him as a combat squad leader to practice at the Kobold Gate. The top priority is to ensure the number of survivors and select new members for the team. Lee Hyun-wook did not understand what the battalion commander was thinking. The battalion commander solemnly ordered that after the entire situation report here was completed, everything was left to Lee Hyun-wook to handle. Lee Hyun-wook obeyed, but Seo Yunya still stared at him. A week later, at the 1st Company of the 3rd Demon Extermination Brigade. Lee Hyun-wook's Inferno Devil Metal has completed metal absorption. The metal weight he can control has increased to 499 grams. A space is being formed in the stomach. Lee Hyun-wook has been hugging the toilet since morning. The system has also warned that due to the appearance of a new space, Lee Hyun-wook will feel pain. It's been a week, but this body is still so weak that the pain feels much more painful. Park Junmo went to the bathroom to look for him. He saw Lee Hyun-wook couldn't come out, thinking he was doing something shady. But who knew that Lee Hyun-wook was in so much pain that he would come back to life? He no longer had the strength to say a word. The Kobold Gate, which everyone ignored and misjudged its danger, eventually suffered many casualties. Luckily, thanks to the efforts of Corporal Choi Shoha, Private First Class on Min Tae, in a state of emergency, was safely transferred to the military hospital. Thanks to this, Lee Hyun-wook gave up the thought that being alone would protect everyone. Members of the support detachment began training to increase their strength so they could at least protect themselves. However, two problems arose. After that day, Corporal Choi Shoha began to bother Lee Hyun-wook again. This is a place where there are too many variables to proceed as planned. In the second issue, Battalion Commander Kim Kang-seok asked him to take office as an officer instead of a deputy officer. Lee Hyun-wook is also very sad. He can only cry in his heart, wishing he could be discharged from the army. Now he is not surprised anymore. Squad leader Kim Kang-seok in this Itaewon campaign pays special attention to him. His ambition to create an ideal military culture regardless of rank grew higher than ever. Why does everyone force you to do what you don't want to do? Lee Hyun-wook could only helplessly tell himself that he would think again during his leave. 3 weeks later, on the first day of vacation, the weather is very nice today. Lee Hyun-wook's system appeared to announce, congratulating him on satisfying special conditions and collecting new skills. The skill is called Fire Flame, which helps him absorb metal faster and store larger amounts of metal in space. Lee Hyun-wook is still lying around in the bathroom. Now he will digest everything faster and no longer have to sit around the bathroom much. Lee Hyun-wook washed his hands and went out. The next time he faced the monsters would be much more difficult. He needed to be careful. Otherwise, you may lose your life. You have to prepare everything carefully during this vacation. This is the time to change the future. As soon as Lee Hyun-wook went out, he encountered an acquaintance again. It was Choi Shoha. She was dressed beautifully and standing next to the water vending machine with a cigarette but couldn't light it. Choi Shoha saw him and asked him if he had a matchbox. Lee Hyun-wook also realized that Choi Shoha had revealed his true form while he wasn't paying attention. The two of them took the train together. Choi Shoha tried to find something to tell Lee Hyun-wook. She asked about his parents, but Lee Hyun-wook replied that his parents were both gone. They passed away when he was young. Choi Shoha was silent, not knowing what else to ask. Lee Hyun-wook found himself a bit decisive. He enthusiastically told the story. As a child, it was a bit difficult and lonely, but since he grew up, he has had more family-like relatives. Choi Shoha asked who those people were. Lee Hyun-wook recalls the past of his previous life. He has friends, colleagues, and comrades, like his relatives. Lee Hyun-wook took the train to Yeongdeung-po. He plans to stay here for 4 days and 3 nights. During this short vacation, you need to fully prepare for the future, and the first thing to prepare is money. Lee Hyun-wook saw the announcement that he needed to find someone to support Blue Tree players. The owner of Blue Tree, who owns assets worth up to trillions at the present time, Gordon Protze. The dirty cash flow of that money flows underneath to bribe high-ranking officials and players to buy and sell items, gradually giving him complete control over everything. There are many reasons for people to sell their souls to the devil, but the most important thing is still money. Even though Lee Hyun-wook isn't capable of making more money than Gordon Protze right now, at least make sure he doesn't get caught up in his money game. He knows the big events that will happen in the future and knows when and where to make money. That means, as long as you invest earlier than others, you can still make a fortune even with little capital, so when investing, someone never betrays you. Must be entrusted to someone who will keep his trust, even the smallest promise. Lee Hyun-wook walked into a shabby apartment complex. He walked up the stairs, and above were 2 people arguing. When Lee Hyun-wook walked in, the 2 stopped. The white-haired young man saw Lee Hyun-wook and happily greeted him. This person is Lee Won-chul. You two have known each other for quite a long time. On the contrary, when Lee Hyun-wook saw these 2 guys, he was not very happy. Lee Won-chul also turned around. He had hated Lee Hyun-wook for a long time. In the past, Lee Hyun-wook only made a few pieces of suspended metal and claimed to be awakened, but he couldn't do anything, so he got bitter and slapped Lee Hyun-wook in the face, making his mouth bleed. Lee Won-chul looked at him horribly, with some ability like a psychopath and daring to call himself an awakened person. He threatened Lee Hyun-wook not to go anywhere and said he was the one who woke up. If he heard it, he would beat him. Lee Won-chul was bad at hooliganism again. He rushed forward aggressively intending to give Lee Hyun-wook a fight just like when he was in school. The other guy quickly stepped forward to stop Lee Won-chul, telling him not to cause trouble anymore. Lee Won-chul didn't listen. He even wanted to beat someone to stop him. Lee Hyun-wook, on the contrary, was not afraid of anyone. He challenged Lee Won-chul to kill him. Lee Won-chul got mad. He rushed up to punch him in the face when he stiffened because a fountain pen was flying halfway waiting to stab Lee Won-chul in the eye. Not only that, a knife was also cutting off his leg. There are also many other sharp weapons competing to point straight at Lee Won-chul. Lee Hyun-wook despised. He may not be able to kill this guy today, but at least he can still give him a wound in a weak place. From being a close combat fighter, he can finish off a player quite simply. At that moment, someone came in from outside the door. He called Lee Won-chul to leave quickly in time for the event. Lee Hyun-wook suddenly changed his attitude as quickly as lightning. He put down his weapon, and pitifully begged Lee Won-chul to forgive him. Next time he would be more careful. Lee Hyun-wook jumped up and hugged Lee Won-chul like close friends. He leaned into his ear to warn him. Lee Won-chul was kicked out of the White Tiger Guild. It is said that he was scared and ran away for his life during his first fight. You know everything about this, Lee Hyun-wook. Lee Hyun-wook threatened that if he didn't want to show his disciples his ugly appearance when fighting and losing to an F-rank guy, then if you know what to do, I could tell that story to someone else. Out at any time. After Lee Hyun-wook finished speaking, he harshly asked Lee Won-chul to hear clearly and then go away quickly. After the others left, only Lee Hyun-wook and the person who had been bullied by Lee Won-chul earlier remained. The two sat and talked together. This person was the person Lee Hyun-wook mentioned as someone he could completely trust, so he told this person everything about stocks and black cards. After Lee Won-chul left with his juniors, he was still extremely bitter, and being a guard standing guard was not a shame. A tall man, seemingly a customer, came out to complain. He criticized the security service for being so bad. In a solemn place like this, someone would do such a bad job.
The other man came in front of Lee Won-chul and scolded him in the face. Don't think you are the owner here. This is Area C, Area A, B, C, this is a VIP area. Do you understand English?
How many times have you said it? If you can't learn it, you have to listen. Lee Won-chul couldn't hold back anymore. He was annoyed by the incident just now and was still being cursed at. He didn't hesitate to punch that man into the sky. He frantically punched him in the face, blood splashed, and his disciples didn't dare him to stop him. After pleasantly beating Lee Won-chul, he ordered his juniors to find information about Lee Hyun-wook for him. He couldn't let this case go, swearing to kill Lee Hyun-wook.